Welcome to Security Field Day 13. I'm Rick Vanover from Veeam.
And I'm Emily Tejas.
Today, we're going to talk about something really differentiating from Veeam, the Veeam difference. Coveware by Veeam, which was, just to run people up as a history lesson, March of 24, this was an acquisition that Veeam did that really makes a difference for our in-house capabilities. Emily?
Yes. So Coveware by Veeam, again, they've been in the business of helping organizations that have been impacted by ransomware, specifically helping them when it came to negotiation, but then also when we start talking about different types of payments, as well as how can we actually help them from being proactive so that way they don't end up in that situation. So they've been around since 2018. And essentially, they have probably the largest database aggregate as far as the different cases that they've supported. So anywhere between 50 to 100 cases per month. And these are just organizations that have been impacted by ransomware. These aren't essentially, these are not essentially Veeam customers. These are just people that have been on for them with retainer. So one thing that they like to do is they collect all that information when they are working with these organizations, and they essentially put out a report every quarter. And in this report, they're able to highlight these are the top 10 or so threat actors or ransomware groups that they have came upon, and they like to go ahead and capture the techniques, tactics, and procedures that they have seen as far as responding to these ransomware cases. So what types of techniques did these threat actors utilize? What types of tools are they using so that way that they are able to gain lateral movements or get more additional access to information? What are some things that organizations should be aware of, right? So that way they could start ensuring that not only are they patching their systems, but maybe they're whitelisting some of these pieces within their platforms, plus also maybe even doing some additional due diligence in the back end to be more proactive. So this is what they lead in, right? And so we have an incident response retainer service, but they also deal with the cyber extortion negotiation, cryptocurrency settlements, decryption support. They have a large database of decryption tools and decryption keys. So they're usually able to help provide that to organizations that have been impacted with actual encryption. And then on top of that, a lot of the things that they do is around those tabletop experiences. So actually walking them through very specific questions or unique, I would say, scenarios in which they could possibly be impacted by. So that way they know exactly what can they do to ensure that they're not going to end up on the wrong side of incidents. And then this is just a quick overview. So 24/7, 365 response. They're usually within 15 minutes being on a call with a user or organization or customer. They also partner with different incident response firms, right? So if we're looking at a CrowdStrike or a Mandiant that really, they specialize in containment eradication efforts. This is where Coveware can help come in to help them when it comes to overall negotiation and being proactive, right? So they actively do partner with those different types of retainer services. So, a lot of large enterprises probably have more than one. This is going to be a supplemental option for them to utilize. And then on top of that, one of the biggest things that I'm actually going to showcase is going to be the patent pending assessment technology, which they actually call Recon Scanner. This is something that they utilize to do forensic investigation. So with Recon, they're able to deploy that on systems that have been impacted. From there, it does a log collection. It goes ahead and actually collects all the information, anything that has happened on that server. And that's what they utilize to actually build out this attack timeline. So they have a database of just the events that have happened that you can find within the MITRE attack framework, but then they also have their own database for different ransomware groups that they've actually seen. And then they keep both of those on hand, and then they create an actual attack timeline for organizations to be able to funnel through. So we offer Recon Scanner, and we're going to wait for that to load. So we offer Recon Scanner as part of the Veeam data platform, so organizations can go ahead and they can install Recon. Essentially what it's able to do is, again, go through and actually collect logs. And once it collects all of that information, we're able to provide that back to Coveware. And Coveware could go through and actually determine okay, what's actually taken place or what has happened on those different types of endpoints. So you have your critical warnings of, what's a potential event or a potential incident. And then we have some high and some medium activity that we can look at here. If we were to dive into some of these events, so we could see that there was a malware detection event that has happened here. We can see the location of said suspicious files. We can see what type of evil file was it that has actually flagged or triggered this event. And then from there, they can go ahead and collect this information and they can run it through with their security teams to go ahead and do some further analysis.
Sorry. Jack Poller, Paradigm Technica. Is the Recon Scanner and Coveware, is that focused on ransomware? Does that respond? Are you looking at all cybersecurity events?
Looks at all different types of events. So brute force attempts. So it also starts looking at things like exfiltration. So like when do we start seeing tools that are being utilized to start moving data outside of the environment as well? So it's highlighting all of those different types of tools that'll be used for what they know as indicators of compromise.
And other behaviors like permission elevation, creating new users, turning off MFA, or across even environmental stuff, Windows and Linux.
Firewall rule change, right? Shell command, a process was created. So, I mean, they'll start looking at all of these different types of events that could be, again, behaviors known for threat actors to utilize when they're moving inside of an environment. I'll give you a recent story with a organization that was actually doing a brand new install of this product. And essentially when they went to do the install, they started to see a lot of malware activity start to flag from what Rick had actually shown earlier. When they went to do an investigation with Coveware, they actually saw through Recon an entire timeline for the last 3 weeks of a specific user actually going in and downloading very suspicious files. There was some other items that are in there. And essentially they all went into a war room, and that is actively being worked on as we speak, right? So it bypassed some of their EDR tools, that bypassed some of their AV tools, but they were able to see it and capture it within Recon itself.
And one thing I'll highlight while we deal with the gremlins of live demos is that this feeds into a data pipeline, right? And this is one environment's look. And then if we aggregate those from other environments, there's learnings that they have that can really kind of, looks like something hot was on the right side of that host right there, for example.
Yeah, and so, I mean, we get to highlight it through based off of just very specific hosts, right? So the benefit here is this was the actual product that they developed themselves in-house to help them with responding to these incidents that can occur when they're helping different organizations respond to, okay, who is it that we might have to get on a phone and negotiate with, right? Is it Akira? Is it Ransom Hub? Is it Fog? They want to know that because you want to know your enemy, right? You want to know, are they going to respond to, XYZ amount, or are these people going to be irrational? One of the things that we do in these tabletop events that we've been hosting all around the United States and also been happening worldwide is talking about those different types of threat actors and the way that they respond to different negotiation techniques and what they usually see. And essentially, with some of these groups, a lot of them are going to be very irrational. They are going to go ahead and they're just going to dump your information on the dark web. They don't care what amount of money it is that you're going to pay. They're never going to delete the data, and they're actually able to find that with some of the recent FBI arrests, right? When they seize some of that information or those data centers from those ransomware groups, they still found remnants of data from organizations that had paid the ransom, that had assumed that they had deleted or got rid of the data and it was still there. So it's providing all of this information so that way customers make the best decision possible for them in order to move forward in a really bad situation.
You mentioned ransomware payments, and I noticed on the Coveware slide itself, you talked about in helping negotiate payments. Do you find that there's any either moral or legal implications to that?
No, because I would say with Coveware themselves, they're always, and Veeam ourselves, we're always going to say you don't pay the ransom. That's going to be your number one. We don't want anybody paying any type of ransom because all you're doing is just perpetuating the cycle. In fact, Coveware was actually founded in 2018 because of the other vendors that were out there at the time. That was all that they were doing, was they were saying, okay, well, don't pay them, pay us, right? And then essentially you'd go and you'd work with this third party and they were just negotiating on your behalf, but it was always for a payment. So what they wanted to get into is not only helping customers to be better proactive, so that way they're never having to perform that payment, but then also giving them all the information necessary, right? Because the last thing we want is for an organization to say, well, we paid it because we thought it was gonna, help us from a brand perspective, or we did everything possible to get the customer data back, so it helped us from a legal perspective. It's never gonna help, right? But so essentially, they're just trying to work with, or we're just trying to work with customers, make sure that we're more proactive with never being in that situation.
Jack, let me say it another way. I would say I've been at Veeam 15 years. This is by far the most impactful acquisition and new market we've gotten into. The business leader of Coveware, Bill Siegel, he goes by CEO of Coveware by Veeam. It's a business unit. He, at our Veeam On conference last year, said something to the effect, loose quote, he can tell in the first 15 minutes of an initial call how well or how poorly an organization is prepared to deal with the situation in front of them. Okay, and you as security folks, if you're practitioners, you walk into things, you're shaking your head. I get that, that's a real thing. Where I'm going with that is the reality is today that there's a lot of work to do. I mentioned earlier, we don't have an example of this and that. The reality is people aren't doing what they need to do. And we're in the business of saying, hey, this needs to be done. We have partners that are trained, but I talk to customers that are like, yeah, I don't have anything immutable. And I'm like, that's an emergency. You leave now, go home, set it up, something like that. There's a lot of work to do. And that's what me, Emily, and our team are in the business of doing.
Yeah, and the other portion of that is also when it comes to like sanction groups, right? How do we make sure that you're not just making a decision completely siloed? I mean, I spoke to an organization 2 months ago that said that they always have I don't know if I should say this, their plan is to always pay. Yeah. And I'm like, what a way to just put your name out there for everybody to go and just attack you. And where in the world did you determine that that was the best choice for you to move forward with, right? So it's, again, continuing to make sure that we are educating those that need to make these types of decisions, because sometimes when you're put inside of those high pressure situations, it helps to have some people that have dealt with that and that's all they deal with, to be able to be like that clear, calm voice to say, this is not going to work out well for you, right?
But there are industry thought leaders saying, just pay it, get it over with, move on. It's not worth your time to negotiate because, everyone has their decision on legality or ethics or morality or job risk, whatever they want. So I always think it's an interesting question. Thanks, Jack, because it is a contentious thing.
Right? No, absolutely.
I'll say it this way. What an organization does to the left of the bang 100% predicates what happens to the right of the bang. Okay? And I think there's a choice, Karen, of what they do ahead of time.
Yes.
That might predicate that mindset. And I think, I've got plenty of examples of organizations that have had incredible outcomes against these threats with us. And that's a great feeling. But you know what? So I'm based in Ohio. We have a tech support center there. It's not all lollipops and Goldilocks. There are some ugly things out there. And there's always a reason why that happened. And actually, I love talking to them about that. I want to know what broke down. What was the problem? Why was there a data loss scenario? And it's, number one thing is I've been talking to them about this for 7 years, was immutable backups, right? That is the single most effective technique to drive data recovery, right? So you're right, Karen, but I'm in the middle of being on the good side of the bang.
And I mean, we talked about negotiation in form of payment, but majority of the times when Coveware does get involved, there isn't a payment that's issued. They're there to help negotiate time, time is what everybody is going to be dealing with during this type of incident, right? How can we get systems back up online? Do we need to go and look at new environments? Do we need to go and start doing scanning for all of our backups to ensure that we're going to be restoring those to a clean state, right? We're not going to be reinfecting ourselves. Do we need to go and have a conversation with our corporate communications team so that way they can issue a statement? Do we need to go make sure that all of our customers are aware of what has been taking place, right? So they're there to help negotiate for that time. So that way they can get everything in the background if that wasn't identified early in their incident response plan. Well, now it can be worked on. Well, they go ahead and keep the threat actor at bay and don't have to worry about them saying, well, we're going to start releasing XYZ information, or we're going to start doing this, right? So that's going to be the other option, or actually that's going to be their main focus, in which Coveware is usually involved in all of these different types of incidents.
I love the Recon Scanner. Is that a point in time, or is that automated where I can set that up to run on cron? Because I think that's really useful data that you're getting in there.
It is automated. So essentially, the customers have access to it. They go and they can download it. They can go ahead and decide which machines they want to go ahead and run that against. And then it's scheduled to run. They'll have that information being pulled into Coveware. Then they'll be able to showcase to them if it's there. Usually what this is very useful for is when you actually have an incident that takes place. Otherwise, I mean, if there's nothing happening in the environment, it's going to be just pretty flat. They're not going to see any information that's happening.
Sure. And how do you collect that data? Is that agent-based?
It is agent-based, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an agent collection that happens, and it's going and it's just capturing any information from the logs itself.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Emily, in a hot standby scenario, how does the technology change, and do you see differences in the way the process works in that way when you look at something like risk recon when you're in a hot standby type of scenario?
When it's in a hot standby scenario.
Well, I don't think it changes the game, Anundre. I think a hot standby, as long as it's on, it's a target, right? And we do a lot of warm, hot, DR sites, and that becomes kind of an interesting attack area where you think, oh, I've got a DR site or I've got a parallel infrastructure, but then that's impacted concurrently. In the recon world, that's going to be transparent. In like a straight line recovery conversation, we have an advantage with the backups on immutable storage and the high-speed recovery techniques. That gets specific quick, but that's a good question.
Any other questions?
Look at that, good on time.
I had just an observation. Like some of our security stuff, I mean, we're doing it for bad actors and malicious intent, but some of it just has saved us from incompetency or ignorance. Things like, so the one I'm curious about is, would this detect any of the stuff you've talked about today? Detect if someone turned off litigation holds or turned off backups or
Turned off encryption?
well, yeah.
Immutability.
Because I've actually had that happen. And with
the litigation hold is common.
Yeah, anything that is done is loggable, trackable, and those things. And Veeam 1, I guarantee you, it sees it all, right? It'll catch it at a minimum at reporting. I don't know if Coveware is looking that deep, but it would detect the off. And then if you think about the ecosystem integrations, that event log, that definitely would be. So yes, in several different ways.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think we'll wrap this section. All right. Well, this was the Veeam difference. I'm sorry. No. So thanks for watching this session at Security Field Day 13, the Veeam difference, Coveware by Veeam. I'm Rick Vanover.
And I'm Emily.
And stay tuned for our final section about some future innovations coming from Veeam.